For this tutorial, I'm using Blender version 3.4. Hi, my name is Guy, Mystery Guy. In this tutorial, you're going to learn how to extend the duration of a video. You'll be changing the frame rate. You'll use an HDRI image. You're going to add a circle. You're going to create an emission object, whatever the heck that is. You're going to use wireframe view, and you're going to duplicate multiple objects. I can't wait. Let's get going. By the end of this tutorial, you're going to create a video that looks just like this. Click off the splash screen, click on the default cube, then press delete, or some people prefer to type the letter X. As a good habit, I'd like you to save your work right away. I've already saved mine. I've called it Tutorial 4. I want more room on the timeline. I'm going to drag that bar up so I can see what's going on. All the tutorials we've done so far, we start at 1, end at 250. I want to change that. Click on 250 and type 300. With the mouse pointer in the timeline, roll the mouse wheel toward you to zoom out so we can see the end. Next, I want to do the keyframes for the camera. To select the camera, I know I can go up to camera and the collection on the top right and click on it, but the camera's right there. I'm just going to click on it. I know it's selected because it's all highlighted. It says camera in the top left. In the scene collection, the camera row is highlighted, and in the scene properties, camera is selected. Let's go to the object properties and type in some values. On frame 1, the X location is 13. The Y location is minus 15. The Z location is 0. Rotation X, I'm going to make it 95. And Z, 40. Mouse pointer back in the viewport, type I, and then location, rotation. There's our first keyframe. Go to frame 300, and now we're going to use a Z location of 2. We're going to change the X rotation to 90. Type the letter I and location, rotation. That's it for the camera. Go up to the Add menu on the top and click Add Mesh UV Sphere. Right-click on it and select Shade Smooth. Go over to the right, the properties, and rename it to Sphere Space A. I'm going to switch to top view. Press 7 on my numpad. What I want to end up with is this sphere down here a little bit, and then duplicate it and have one here, one here, one here. But I want them all to be exactly equidistant from each other. To do that, I'm going to add mesh and a circle. On the bottom left, add circle. I'm going to change the radius to 4. That gives me a guide. I'm not going to render that circle. I want to move that sphere right down to the bottom of that circle at 6 o'clock, and then duplicate it to 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and 3 o'clock. Let me click on the sphere, type G and Y, that's the Y-axis, and then just move my mouse pointer down. I want that little circle in the center of that sphere to line up with the outline of my circle, around there. I say around there. If I look at the Y coordinate, it says minus 3.9. I know that should be exactly 4. I'm going to type -4, enter. Good. I want it a little higher. The Z location, I'm going to enter 1. Since I'm going to duplicate it, I'm going to add the materials to the sphere now, so I don't have to add materials to all the duplicates. So go to Materials Properties, click New, and rename the material to Sphere. And now we're going to change the surface. Where it says Principled BSDF, click on that and go up to, don't you hate it when things are in alphabetical order? Glass. The roughness, change that to 0.1. That's going to be a glassy material now for the sphere. I'm going to add an empty, so go up to the Add menu, click on Empty, and then Plane Axes. I want to parent that empty to the sphere. We did parenting in the last tutorial. Click on the child, hold Shift, click on the parent, go up to Object, Parent, Object. To do the parenting, click on the child first, which is the sphere, hold Shift, click on the parent, which is the empty, go up to the Object menu, down to Parent, and select Object. Go over to the Collection panel where the empty is, double-click on the name and rename it to Empty Sphere A. I'm going to add some keyframes for the empty. So go back to Frame 1, go to the Object Properties, and the Z rotation is 0. Click that little button, that's our keyframe. Go to the end of the timeline, that's frame 300, and change the rotation from 0 to 1800. Add a keyframe. Let's go back to the beginning of the timeline and press play. It's working. That's what I wanted. So at this point, the sphere is a child of the empty. It has its materials. So now, and only now, we're ready to duplicate that sphere. Before we do, one more thing. If I look at the collection panel, I don't see the sphere anymore. That's because if I click that little triangle beside empty, the sphere is below empty. That shows it's a child of the empty. Right, let's get busy with the duplications. Let's go back to frame 1. What I want to do is to duplicate the sphere. I'm just going to type Shift D and show you. I want a copy at 9 o'clock, another copy at 12 o'clock, and a third final copy at 3 o'clock. There's 3 ways to do it. The first and simplest way is just using your eyeball. Let me duplicate it. Shift D and drag it. And see the center of that sphere, that little colored circle? I want to line that up with the x-axis and right on the circle that intersects the axis. And then I'm going to click. That's pretty darn close. Shift D again. Grab this one up. Line up that center dot of the sphere, click, Shift D again, and there's the last one. That's pretty accurate, but it's not exact. That was the first method. The second method, I'm going to show the exact way. Let me undo what I did. Top left, Edit, Undo, shortcut is Control Z. I'm going to press Control Z again. Now the accurate method. Take a look at that red line, that's the x-axis. That green line is the y-axis. I want to duplicate that sphere so the center lines up exactly at that intersection point. Look at the major grid lines. I'm going to count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I know the x coordinate is 4. And y, it's not up, it's not down, it's 0. So the x coordinate at 9 o'clock is 4 and y is 0. My question is it plus 4 or minus 4? Look at the gizmo in the top right. I see the letter X on a straight line going left and right. I see the letter Y going up and down. That tells me that the x-axis is going left and right. The y-axis is up and down. That's important because let me click my mouse, hold the mouse wheel down and drag the display around. Look at the gizmo on the top right. It's turning also. That's useful is because if I wanted to move an object, let's say over here, is that plus or minus x? The x is plus, look at the blank x. So if I want to move something in this direction, that's the positive x direction. If I wanted to move the sphere this way, is that plus or minus y? The gizmo tells me that's minus y. If I want to move it in that direction, I'm going to use minus y increments. All right, back to top view. I'm going to Shift D to duplicate it, and let me just drag it up here and then click. So what is that coordinate? 1, 2, 3, 4 in x. Is that plus or minus? That's the minus direction. Y up and down is 0. So the coordinate is minus 4, 0. I'm going to go to the right in the object properties and type minus 4 and 0. That's exact, folks. Let me duplicate that. Drag it up to the top. What's that coordinate? The x coordinate is 0 and y is 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that plus or minus? That's plus. So that coordinate is 0, 4. I'm going to type that in. That's all I do. Duplicate it again, drag it down, click, and that coordinate is 1, 2, 3, 4 in x, 0 in y. So I'm going to type 4, 0. Done. Those positionings now are exact. I've shown you two methods to position the spheres around the circle. The first was just eyeball. It was pretty good. The second one was to figure out what the coordinates of each sphere are and then just type them in. The third method you're going to need if you have a situation like this. There's 11 spheres. Positioning them equally around a circle is quite difficult. The solution is to go over to the right. See that wrench? That's the modifier properties. To show you how that works, let me disable from the viewport the spheres. Click on the first one. I'm going to click that wrench, add modifier, and it's an array modifier. The count. I'm going to click that right arrow. I said there were 11. Zoom back out. Now there is a way that you can have these 11 positioned around that circle, but that's beyond the scope of this tutorial. I'm not going to teach array modifiers. I invite you to take a look at a YouTube tutorial that does explain how to do that. The channel name is Neb Motion Tutorials, and the name of the tutorial is Blender Quick Tip 008 Circular Arrays Without Mesh Deformation. So I invite you to try that on your own. It's beyond the scope of this tutorial. Let me cancel that array modifier, bring the others back into the viewport, and let's get on to the next step. I want to confirm everything's working. Let me click on the empty, type R for rotate, and just move my mouse. Yeah, it's working. I'll right-click to cancel the rotation. The next thing I want to add is a light beam between the centers of all the spheres, 4 beams. They'll look like this. Go up to the Add menu, Mesh, and Cylinder. In the bottom left, where it says Add Cylinder, change the radius to 0.02, the depth to 6.5. Under Location, for Z, make that 1, and the rotation for X is 90. The rotation for Z is 45. There's our light beam. To get rid of this panel on the bottom left, just click anywhere, it's gone. Let's click back on that light beam and rename that to light beam. I'm going to add a material to that light beam. Click on the material properties, then New, rename it to light beam. And this time under Surface, click where it says Principled BSDF and go up to Emission. Now that light beam is going to act like a lamp. Change the strength from 1 to 10. I want to position that beam between the 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock spheres. I'm going to type G for grab, and I want that beam to pass through the centers. That looks pretty good, but there's a better way to do it. Go up to the viewport options, and there's a circle with lines across it. That's the wireframe view. Click on that. Now the spheres, we can see the structure of the spheres. Click on that light beam again, type G for grab, and now it's pretty easy to line that beam up, crossing right through the centers. I'm going to zoom in a bit. Grab again, right through the centers. That's it. Before I duplicate it, I'm going to parent the empty to the light beam. As we did before, the light beam is the child. Click on that first. The empty is the parent. Hold Shift, click on that. They're both selected. Go up to Object, Parent, and then Object. Click off it. I'm going to click on the empty to test it. Type R, and just move my mouse. Yeah, that's working. All right, go back to the light beam. Select the light beam. Shift D to duplicate, and don't click, just move your mouse. Drag that into position on the centers of the other 2 spheres. Click when you've got it done. Shift D to duplicate it again. I'm just going to move it out in the middle so I can see it better. I have to rotate this one. Type R, 90, enter. Type G to grab. Position that one in place. I think there. Shift D to duplicate. Grab, put it in place. Click. Click on the empty and type R for rotate. Everything's working. I'm going to change the viewport display back to solid. Click that white circle. I don't need this circle in the center anymore, so click on it, press the delete key, or type the letter X. What I want to do now, I'm going to hold my wheel mouse down, drag it up a bit. I want to copy all of this, the spheres, the light beams, and the empty. Let me zoom back out a bit. But that light is going to get in the way if I do a copy. So I'm going to, let me drag this down a bit. I'm going to turn off the visibility of the light. With my mouse pointer up on the top right, Hold the mouse down, drag to the bottom left. I've just selected everything. And we can see on the collection panel, they're all red now. They're selected. At this point, I can duplicate it. Shift D. I want to move them up. So type Z, and 2, then Enter. Click on a sphere. I'm going to type on the numpad 1 for a side view. Yeah, they line up just the way I wanted. I would like the top spheres to rotate in the opposite direction of the bottom ones. Let me go over to the collection panel, empty sphere A. There's our keyframes. We started with Z equals 0. Go to the end, we end up with 1800. I'm going to click on empty sphere A. Let me rename that to empty sphere B. And this keyframe, where it shows 1800, I'm going to click on it and change that to minus 1800. Now, just because I typed something in, that doesn't mean it's automatically changed the keyframe. No, no, no. You have to right-click on it and replace single keyframe. Now, that ends at minus 1800. Let me press numpad 7 for the top view, go back to the beginning, and just drag the playhead. Just to confirm, they're moving in opposite directions. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Back to a different view, take a look at it. That's what I wanted, all right. Back to frame 1. I've just switched to camera view by pressing 0 on the numpad. This would be a good idea for you to save your work again, File Save, or just Control S. Now, the grand finale, folks. We're going to bring in an HDRI image to the scene. When you first load your HDRI image, your screen's going to look like this. There's a couple things I want to point out before I show you how to add it to your Blender file. First of all, this is a night scene. That looks a little too bright to me. I'm going to click on the world properties and the strength. I'm going to click that left arrow, keep clicking, make it darker. I'm going with 0.1. I like that. The next thing I'd like to point out, look at those spheres, how reflective they are. Let me click on one and go down to the materials properties. And remember, we made it glass and the roughness is 0.1. That's pretty low, which makes it very reflective. If I drag the timeline, you can see how that reflection is changing depending on the position of the spheres. The next thing I want to point out is, over in the collection panel, look at my light. It's turned off. I don't have any lights in this scene. All the light is coming from the HDRI image. And we can see reflections of the street lamps here, 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 here. The next thing, and this is absolutely fabulous, I'm going to click on the camera to select the camera, go down to Object Properties. Now the Z rotation, I'm going to drag it to the right. I'm going to click on the X rotation. I can aim the camera down or up. Scroll again. So the point is, with an HDRI image, you can pick your starting point of where you want your animation to begin. The HDRI image we're going to use can be downloaded from the internet. I'd like you to go to the site Polyhaven, the URL up top, polyhaven.com. They have HDRIs, textures, models. Click on Browse HDRIs. Nice categories on the left for you. Don't do that now. We're in the middle of a tutorial. The image we want, click the search bar and type VIG. And there it is at the bottom. That's the one I'm using. Click on that. So that's the image itself. If you look on the top right, see where it says 16K? That's the resolution. And that's a huge file. If you use that, that's going to slow Blender down. I recommend click on that, select 4K. Then click the download button. Once it's downloaded, save it wherever you want, your computer, or keep it in the download folder just temporarily. That's fine. Once you've downloaded it, let's add it to our scene. Go up top to the shading workspace, click on that. On the bottom, where it says object on the left, switch to world. Can't quite see it. I'm going to hold Shift key down, drag my mouse. You're going to add texture and environment texture. Swing that into place. I'm going to box select these. Hold the Shift key down, drag them to the right, make a bit more room. I'm adding 2 more modules on the left. So add, search, and what you're going to search for is mapping. Click on that, drag that into place. And the next one, you're going to add input texture coordinate. Put that over there on the left. Connect generated to vector, vector to vector, color to color. On the top viewport, switch to rendered view. And that reddish purple area means it's a file not found because we have to click on open under the environment texture. So click open and then browse to where you just saved your downloaded file. Then go back up to the viewport, type 0 for camera view, and that's what your scene will look like. If you recall, when I showed you my demo a few minutes ago, I said that looked too bright. Go down to the strength and to the background and type 0.1. That's better. What you can do to move that scene is under rotation. Click Z and drag it. That's how you pick a rotation you want. Let me reset that. The settings that I used for location was -0.3. And for the rotation, the Z rotation, I chose 597. Once that's done, go back out to layout in the top left, click that. Go over to the right on the top and click rendered view, and there we go. Now you have an HDRI image in your Blender file. We're ready for the next step. I'm curious about that light we have in the collections panel. I've never used it yet. I'm going to turn the visibility on to see what effect it has on the scene. Let me turn it off and on a few times. It's changing. It adds a little something. I'm going to keep it on. We're going to render now to produce our video of the animation. So as always, before you render, go up to File and Save. There's the shortcut, Control S. To render, you go to Output Properties. Look down at the frame rate. It says 24 frames per second. Click on that and choose 30. That's the standard these days. It gives you a smoother animation. Under Output, yours might have a file name of tutorial 3. If it does, click on it and change the 3 to a 4. If yours shows something different, click the file folder and then navigate to the folder that you want. Name your output video file then. The format is FFmpeg video. The encoding container is MPEG-4. Once those have been set, go up to Render and Render Animation. When your animation is done, your video file will look like this. I'm going to recap what you learned in this tutorial. You learned how to extend the duration of an animation, change the frame rate, use an HDRI image, you added a circle, you created an emission object that was the light beams, you used wireframe view, and you duplicated multiple objects. You don't want to miss our next tutorial, folks. It's a gigantic time saver. We're going to revisit tutorial 2. Remember that one? That's where we keyframed the camera, moved it up, changed the angle. In the next tutorial, we're going to be changing the camera angles and views drastically. And we're not going to be using a multitude of keyframes, my friend. No. We are going to use 5 different cameras. How sweet is that? See you soon. Lights, cameras, action!